3. Well, good morning, everyone. I am here this morning with Up Next with Laura. Laura, thank you so much for being here this morning and giving me your time to talk about community, servant leadership, and just some great things that Goodwill is always doing, but now, more importantly, in light of everything that's going on in our community. Welcome.
Thank you. It's absolutely my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so tell people, I know before we get into like the depth of like services and what's happening with Goodwill and all these things and different perspectives with everything that's going on and what's about to take place, but tell people who you are.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Mission Officer here at Goodwill. I've actually worked at 3 different Goodwills across the country. So I have about, 10, 15 years experience with Goodwill as a network, which is a really great opportunity. I, for myself, have a family, and so we're dealing with the whole, schooling at home. We have teenagers in middle school and high school. So, we have a college schedule going right now because they don't have to get up early. So people stay up late, get up a little bit later. And so it's been interesting to navigate that together.
Yeah, I read your bio, and of course, it's pretty impressive. I'm going to put you on the spot because I know that you, prior to Kansas City, you were vice president of, of operations in the greater area with Nebraska. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about a little bit how that prepared you for the shift to come to Kansas City?
Sure. So in Nebraska, I was over the operations of our mission services there as well. And so I learned a lot over my few years there about working with people with significant disabilities and supporting individuals in finding jobs and helping them to maintain those jobs. I think the other piece I really learned there is about developing community. And so really working hard at partnerships and realizing that those don't take place overnight. You really need to get to know one another. You need to develop trust. And it's only when that happens can you really partner together as nonprofits with state agencies. And so that was really the other piece that I learned quite a bit in Nebraska.
That's really cool. I like the part that you talked about developing relationships, and it doesn't happen overnight, which I think we all know that, but it really shows in your journey personally and where you end up at. And also that your house is like a college campus, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I like that too. I can relate. I'm like, what time is it? What day is it? I literally think it's like Thursday, and I'm like, no, today's Friday.
Yeah.
So incredible. You also in 2019, you developed a team that provided a lot of services, 15,000 plus services for 3,000 people to take advantage of. And that really made a pivot, right? Obviously, for a lot of people to have access to resources. That's huge. How did you do that? What were you doing?
So the biggest shift for us in the last year has become a decentralized mission model. So as I've gotten to know the Kansas City area, there are a lot of nonprofits. There are a lot of people who do good work, but we're all scattered everywhere. One of the biggest barriers is transportation. People can't afford to get around. They don't have the means to get around, or the bus line doesn't go where they want to go to get the services that they need. And so this last year or so, we've really worked hard on identifying where people are already receiving services. And then how do we partner with those organizations to bring our services to them? And so it allowed us to access more individuals and provide them with some opportunities for support. Those 3,000 people and the 15,000 services could vary from working with a student for 9 months during a skills training program to a one-time resume development. Let's make sure you know how to fill out your application, and now you're good to go. So our services vary based upon the person's need. It could be a one-time, one-touch service. It could be a service that lasts for months to support that individual. So
yeah. What is your take, Laura, on, now obviously with unemployment is definitely increased across the country, but also there were some areas in work development or access to employment opportunities or service providers that were kind of already not strengthened as probably what they should be because of just years of, we know this is a problem, but we're still not addressing it. In your opinion, what are those areas that we could do as a community to really get better, to leverage more opportunities for people who need them the most?
So a couple of things. One is, I think, working together. So
Mm-hmm.
many times there's limited funding. There's limited grant dollars, there's limited federal dollars. And so a lot of times people are trying to get their slice of the pie, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so many times that makes our services disjointed for the people that we serve. One opportunity that we have, I've started working with a group that is really diving into this of how do we work better together to provide a better seamless experience for people, that we just help them access what they need to access without having to go to all these different people to understand what they may be eligible for. I think the other gaps that we will start to see is that this is a long-term issue now.
Mm-hmm.
When people become unemployed, as soon as businesses open, they're not back at 100%.
Mm-hmm.
They're back at 25, 50, maybe 75. So we also have that unique perspective that we're an employer. So we have our stores. We're fortunately going to be opening up 4 of them next week, but they are limited hours. We're reduced staff. And so, as an employer, people aren't going to automatically get their jobs back when the doors
Mm-hmm.
open again. And so a lot of the individuals that may have not been part of, I guess, the system before, that they had a steady job, they weren't experiencing issues. This will be a new thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
They've not had this gap in employment. And so now they don't even know where the services are or where to turn to because they've not used anything in the system before. So it will take a lot more hand-holding for some folks to help them figure out, okay, because of this situation, you can actually have access to this training program. Let's up your skills. So,
Yeah.
I think that's probably the other piece, is that there's a big gap between where people are and the
Mm-hmm.
skills required for the jobs, especially for the jobs coming in the future. I mean, one thing we hear a lot now in workforce development is that employers are looking at, well, how do we engage even more into this automation and robotics? But okay, so workforce development, how are we engaging people and training them and having them ready for
Mm-hmm.
those jobs, or they will be left behind and left out of the job market?
For sure. You said a lot of great things in all of that about how services are first off, they're just changing
Mm-hmm.
every single day with technology and just all these different nuances. But there's also a huge gap when it comes to individuals having the skill set that is required to, kind of complete that task or really execute that job role. And so it sounds like to me we need to go back and really, not just with the resume or not just with, maybe it's the writing piece. It's really the hands-on, practical, everyday skill set that someone needs to have in order to really be in that particular role.
Yes, absolutely. And so, as we are reinventing ourselves in our
Mm-hmm.
mission services, because we had to discontinue for a period of time here most of our programs because there's not funding,
Mm-hmm.
and our staff, are not available. And so, as we're looking at reinventing ourselves, we're really looking hard at, we need to be training people with the skills that they need. And we need to figure out who are the partners to work with to say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we need this level of understanding and knowledge coming in. If someone's not there, who's going to help them get there? Because I think in some cases the gap is pretty large. And so we may need to help with literacy. We may need to help with even just the basic skills of arriving to work on time and some of those pieces. And so what do we tackle as an organization, and who's doing it well in our community that we
Mm-hmm.
partner with then to help those folks get to that point? And that way we can impact their income and their ability to get beyond a
Mm-hmm.
substandard wage, get to that living wage level and help them get further in life than what they would have before.
Yeah, and we've seen that recently. I think even with our mayor, with the free bus transit
Mhm.
opportunities, and I think that takes a big weight off of people who don't have transportation of their own to get to point A to point B. But like you said, it's going to take more than just getting on the bus. But when I get there, feeling comfortable, no, you're fine. Feeling comfortable to execute my role and my job. And so hopefully Kansas City continues to move more on a way that is more equitable for a lot of people in a lot of different sectors.
Right, absolutely. And I think our mission statement really speaks to that heart. And it's that we empower people to discover their potential and adapt for the future through the power of work. And so, it's really discovering what people want to do, what they're good at, and how do we help them then achieve that, and really achieve that in a way that prepares them for what's coming for work, not only what's here now, but what's coming in the future.
Yeah, that's really cool. Is there anything that you have thoughts pertaining to, like we already talked about, there's gaps, there's things that we need to address. This is really a time, and I think for a lot of people in executive leadership, Courtney Thomas and I, CEO of New House Shelter, talked about this yesterday. We can't continue to, do a lot of the services that we've been doing with the same gaps and leave them unaddressed. And so what are those things to you and your perspective that in executive leadership in Kansas City, Missouri, are some of the things that we have to captivate, cultivate, really communicate with other people in that space to really make sure that starts at the top, it trickles down to the bottom to the people that are really being able to be impacted from the services?
Sure. I really think a gap that could grow is the distinction between those who are in the urban, what's considered the urban core here in Kansas City, and just the disparities that have existed there for a long time. And in a situation like this, we have an opportunity to level set that. And so how do we engage with those communities to make sure the individuals are ready and available and skilled for the jobs as they reopen, so they can be a successful candidate just like anybody else applying across the metro? The issue will become is that a lot of people are out of work, which means there will be a lot of skilled candidates. And so if we don't act quickly enough to bring people up to speed, they will again be left behind. And especially as you consider even the educational gap that has existed. Now we've had students at home trying to learn from home in neighborhoods that don't always have access to Wi-Fi, that don't always have access to technology, or if they do have access, how do I work it? And how do I make sure my student is still learning? And so we need to make sure we're working together as a community to use this as an opportunity to really invest in those areas and level set so that people have the skills and even the supports that they need to be successful coming out of this.
That's amazing. I think it's going to take a barbecue and, say, Laura, come on down, let's go down here and kick it. Just get all the executives of Kansas City, get a barbecue, everybody bring something, we got everything there. We just need the people to come to us. I think that'll be really cool. I think it's going to take some very common, basic communication styles, just like if you were talking to your family, just like if you were talking to one of your friends. It's the same thing. Now we're just having a conversation about how can I help you? And in order to do that, we're going to have to start getting outside of not just people coming to us, but also we got to go there. And if it looks like us literally having a barbecue in the backyard, we need to do that. That's my opinion. And here at Black Excellence KC, we pride ourselves in being the dot between the lines. And so I think as we continue to move forward and have these conversations, get the opportunity to really know people like yourself and really be able to expose, what is it that executive leaders in your field think, that's pretty big. It's pretty big.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to encourage people, I know you've been scrolling it at the bottom here, is that we do have a text hotline, and we want people to text in what they need help with. Could be job search, it could be access to healthcare, it could be mental health concerns. People are experiencing different in this world of being at home all the time. And some people struggle with that, and that's okay, but we want to make sure they have access to those resources. So we definitely want people to reach out. We want to support them where they're at and what they see their needs are next.
Yeah. So, obviously our mayor and city officials all over Kansas City, and also with Kansas, with Governor Laura Kelly as well, are making the steps to start to reopen our city. And so with that, we know there will be an increasement with services, but also there's still some CDC guidelines that we have to abide by in order to be effective. This is a two-way question. Can you talk about first, what do you predict Goodwill services will look like as this new normal for us will transpire? And then secondly, I guess, what are some of the things that you think, and moving forward, you guys would need to continue to build on?
Sure. So I'm going to have a hard time remembering both those at once. So you may have to remind me.
I will.
So remind me the first part again.
Just as we reopen, just like, what are some of your initial thoughts about how services will kind of, like, of course they're going to increase, but like you said earlier on, if you guys don't pivot, or people who are really instrumental in providing jobs, readiness, and training, and all of those things, it's not going to look the same necessarily. And so how are you guys going to adapt to that?
Right. And so I think one key piece that we've already adapted to is providing some virtual access, right? Mm-hmm. So we can invite someone to a Zoom meeting and meet them that way. We are still willing to meet face-to-face if we need to assist someone, if we don't have another option. I think as we move in the future, we need to have both options available. I mean, we've heard over time that this could come and go with its spikes. And so I think we need to be prepared, as all nonprofit service organizations. How are you going to pivot when it spikes again? And so making sure there are masks available for people when they're coming to meet with you. We have actually employed people through contract services to actually make masks, and are using that cool as a revenue generating opportunity for us as well to support our services. So our mission staff who are still here working, that we're able to, add a little bit of revenue and income for us as well. And so the other piece for us that we're really focused on this year, one is this year we're going to continue to focus on getting people back into work, providing the digital support for digital skills, access to the text line. So that will continue for, this next year. We would love to get our mobile lab up and running again, which is a van that has laptops available, a Wi-Fi hotspot to kind of provide some training and support. We just need some additional funding with that. And really, the remainder of this year is for us preparing our next training programs. So what does training look like so we can enhance people's skills and have them ready for that next workforce opportunity that's coming? So that's kind of we're actually in the middle of that discussion and decisions right now. So over these last couple of weeks, I think other service providers, as we move forward, we all need to be willing to work together. And we all need to be willing to come to the table with what we have, what we can give, and then also look at opportunities through foundations and other revenue sources together, and not try to, and that's hard. As a nonprofit, the line is thin, right? And so every time you see a funding opportunity, it's hard to think about, okay, if I partner with someone, we're sharing this, which means it doesn't go as far. So I think everyone needs to be willing to say, okay, what can I bring to the table, and how do we support our community? And then other funding sources, foundations, the city, whomever is available, also need to realize that we're going to need some support, not just for the next month or two until business is open, but this is a long-term issue that we're going to really have to work through for especially the training and employment of people who've been out of work.
Yeah, that's the reality of the situation pertaining to here to Kansas City Metro and in other areas of our community as well. Do you think that there needs to be a strategic planning and a sense of all leaders across Kansas City in different sectors, whether that is like Father Justin at Thelma's Kitchen and Reconciliation Services, and was talking to him last week, and he kind of talked about that as well. Courtney yesterday talked about, domestic violence, and, Newhouse being one of the oldest domestic violence shelters, giving 88 beds, but they're turning away people at the same rate that they're taking people in. That's crazy. Right. So they're turning away the other half. Like, what do we need to have that meeting, a round table meeting?
I tell you what, those get complicated when there's so many of us in the space. But I do think it's necessary. While those are hard, those are the necessary things that need to take place. And I think when I think back to my experience of coming to Kansas City, so I've been here around 4 years. I can't remember exactly how long, but around 4 years that I've been here at this Goodwill. It has taken me 2 to 3 years just to figure out who are the players, who's doing what, and I still don't know it all yet because there's so much that happens here in the metro area, especially when you deal with the complication of Missouri and Kansas.
Yeah.
So there's two different, styles of doing the work. Maybe there's also different funding mechanisms. And so you've got to figure out both sides of the state line, and who the players are on both sides of the state line. We're a unique organization in that we go over both sides of the state line. So we can serve both sides. But it takes a lot of work, and I know there are some efforts going on in pockets of that we've brought some people together, but I know it doesn't include everybody. But it is a struggle once you include everybody to figure out, okay, how do we manage this? Because there are thousands of nonprofits in Kansas City, thousands, and it just gets overwhelming.
Yeah, I think for everybody, just the thought of like having, maybe a part of, a small, nice sized room with all of Kansas City leaders would be incredible. But I think it needs to happen. Sometimes you have to do something different that we've never seen before in order for CEOs and top executives and service providers to take 2 hours out of your morning and come engage with not only my next door neighbor, but people on the Kansas and Missouri side to hear how are we collectively working together in sync to make sure that we're impacting. Because as you mentioned, I mean, it took you 2 years to really, and you're still learning to figure out where services are. So in this time of crisis, not that we have it all figured out, not that we know all the answers, but who's the who's, we should, without a hesitation, know the people in the areas that we need to be communicating with effectively to make sure we can reach who we need to reach. And so we got technology, there's no excuse. So we need to make that happen. That's my opinion. Going back to reopening Kansas City, I think there needs to be some different approaches, the way that leaders across our city communicates with one another. And we can't continue to have this gap. And it's not necessarily a bad gap. It's just not happening. So it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just something that if it's once a quarter, we need to make sure we can communicate.
Yeah. And I know there's lots of organizations trying to do that as best they can. You've got United Way, you've got Mark, you've got the KC Chamber. I mean, everybody's working very diligently.
For sure.
There's just a lot of us. And so it can be difficult.
With the KC Chamber, everybody, Scott, all those guys. Yeah.
Yep. Civic Council. I mean, everybody's been working on these issues. And so, I think it would be good to figure out what kind of format would be helpful for that. How do we bucket some of these services so we know who's doing what, keeping that information updated, especially as nonprofits are potentially changing their services in the face of this. That's going to be a whole new thing to learn based on what people are doing coming out of this, once they're opening up again. So,
this is some good stuff. we're gonna have to share this. People need to tune in. Need to listen. This is really some good stuff. I'm learning as much as I'm talking. I'm learning just much more because it's just incredible to hear people like yourself talk about some of the similarities that Black and Brown people we've been experiencing for quite some time, as well as others, but it hits our community a lot harder. We've seen the numbers here recently, and like you said, with the second peak, we're not even past the first wave, and we're already trying to reopen, which is, you got to do it at some point, but it's not going to be normal.
Yeah, and I can see in my neighborhood where I live, people are still doing work in their yards. They're getting work done on their house. I mean, a lot of those folks have jobs where they can work from home. They've not seen the impact. A lot of the individuals in these other communities, they have jobs where they can't work from home. So once they're sent home, there's no income. Or if thankfully the unemployment is coming, but then how do you utilize those funds to be ready to come back again to work in the future. And so I want to acknowledge there's a disparity, and we need to work together as a city to level set the playing field. And so how do we provide, we did an exercise the other day as we were considering what should we do next for our mission services. And we did an exercise where we looked at opportunities, access, your family, and there were specific questions, and you kind of started at the beginning of the line.
Yeah.
And based upon whether you answered yes or no, you either went forward or backwards. And to know what opportunities some people have just because of what family they're born into versus somebody who doesn't have access to a library on a regular basis in their own home to read books if you're a child. If your parents have gone to college or if they've graduated high school, all those factors play into your access to opportunity now. And so equalizing as best as we can that access to opportunities will help people get further along than what they would have otherwise. And so I just want people to have the opportunity. They have to choose if they want to go after it. But if they want to go after it, they need to have access and the opportunity to gain that skill set that they need.
Yeah. On the flip side and a fun side, what are you looking forward to? Like something in Kansas City that you love to do that you're like, man, I can't wait to have this meal, or I can't.
That is one thing. We love to go out to eat as a family. And so I'm like, so we pick up stuff on the way home once in a while or things like that. I actually am really looking forward to being with my coworkers again. When you're dealing with connecting via Zoom, it's still not the same. I'm looking forward to meeting with some of our partners over coffee again and, having some of those face-to-face interactions. As a family, we're looking forward to going back to church again at some point. We go to a very large church, so it could be a while yet because the 10% capacity limit, we're going to be over that for quite a while. So, so just that personal connection. I will say something that's interesting in our families. We have introverts and extroverts. So the introverts have been really enjoying all this time at home. The extroverts, like myself, are like, I'm really glad I get to go to work once in a while because this would drive me crazy. So I think also recognizing everyone's looking forward to something different. And some people are going to, they're going to be concerned, to go back out for a while, or they're like, I kind of enjoy this being at home thing. Meanwhile, the rest of us want a big hug because we've not been able to do that for a while. So
exactly. No, it's I think it's just so cool that one of Kansas City's great things we take pride in is small business, and so we've seen a lot of them pivot. But like you said, something very important, even just like the normal day to day, your coworkers.
Right.
And so, do you think that will change? Because I know, like, we always, care for your coworkers and we're a team, but it's like, no, like now, are we really a team? I miss you. Where are you at?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Really keeping tabs on each other. And so I know that the workplace will be different going forward. We've already, made a decision that people can work virtually if they want to, if that's possible for their job. And so we'll probably have fewer people in the building, but, even today we have a couple of things going on. So there's a few of us here, and it's nice to have that human interaction with one another instead of via video. So it'll be good to have that again.
That's good. My last question before we wrap up to you, economically, we always said, you can't work from home. It's impossible. There's no way you need to be at work. And then I learned with Courtney Thomas yesterday that we shouldn't automatically assume that when people take PTO that things are just okay. And so do you think that this will strengthen, because there's going to be a lot of momentum that when people return to work under the best circumstances, just to be able to be in the office again with, some concerns, but just happy to be around and in some normalcy. Will this strengthen team dynamics and really allow the workplace to kind of ease up a bit. Like, it's okay. Like, everybody relax. Like, just take a breath. It's okay. Like, we've shown so much grace. And so how do we take this time of, passion and being selfless and not selfish and understanding and still carry this, not for a year, for you as a person, because it's always been there, and people are like, yeah, I said thank you. It's like, you should have been saying thank you all the time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a better appreciation for what people are willing to do, especially for our staff right now. We've had a lot of people step up and do things they were not expected to do before because we're reduced in staff. So everyone took on an additional load. So I think some of that becomes gratefulness for those that do come back and can take off some of that load is helpful. But also I think people are a lot more conscientious of, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And really acknowledging that it's okay to be stressed. And I know for us, we've had to work on, and I'm not always the best at this either, that self-care of, again, even when you're working from home, there is that I don't want to call it guilt, but this burden of, we've had to let go a lot of people. I'm not one of them, which means I need to work doubly hard to ensure, or to help. We can't ensure anything for the future, but to help us be better set to bring more people back into the workforce. And so, but while we all want to work extra hard, we also need to take care of ourselves to make sure that we're there and available and able to handle all that's going to be coming next, as the marketplace starts opening again. So I think that's another critical piece.
Yeah, that's an important point, because I think today marks the first day of mental awareness.
Mental health awareness month.
I'm guilty of that as well. I think, we can never not take care of ourselves enough. And hopefully this afforded us some kind of insight on the areas that we've lacked, because I know it's exposed things to me as well. Maybe that's a counseling check-in, once every other, couple of weeks or something. So hopefully we're all learning better things to become better people.
Yes.
Laura Ritterbush, thank you so much for doing this. When people go back and replay this, they can text the hotline and refer people. It's a text only. You guys will work efficiently to get back with them. You heard it here, guys. Up next, tune in tonight, Kira, Cherie, and Winter Harris. We're going to talk Girl, Where You At, 8 p.m. Thank you so much for tuning in, and God bless.